Welcome back to the Writing Biz. Today, I'm joined by Richard Sparks, a versatile storyteller whose career spans writing for iconic British television like Not the 9 O'Clock News, collaborating on operatic legends like Placido Domingo, and most recently publishing his debut satirical fantasy novel, New Rock, New Realm. He's inspired by his love for online role playing games, which I'll love to hear more about. His latest venture marks the beginning of an exciting four-part adventure series. Today, we're discussing leveling up later in life and exploring how core storytelling principles translate across different mediums, the power of creative reinvention, and why staying open to new risks is the ultimate secret to a lasting writing career. Richard, thank you so much for coming on. Welcome to the Writing Biz.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
You've successfully written for so many different genres, your TV, theater, opera, and now long-form fantasy fiction. When you are stepping into a completely new arena later in life, how do you handle the beginner's mind while still leveraging your decades of experience?
When it comes to changing genres, if you haven't got a name outside the writing world, I had a reputation as a scriptwriter and as a script editor, both in America and in the UK, but nobody knew me as a name, so that my books were not supported by, if I'd been a gardener off the television or a golfer or somebody that people knew the name of, they would think, this looks interesting, I like him or her, I'll buy the book or take a look at it. So you're in with the other 5 million books that are published every year, most of them self-published, which is a very crowded field. You have to realize that despite 40 years of experience, you're nobody in that world. And if you've come up with a project that's good enough to be published, as my New Rock series was, because my agent told me it was when I sent her the first book, she said, this is just what people are looking for. So I said, great, well, here we go. But you have to realize that you're nobody. Publishers don't want books. They want writers. They want names. They want something that the public knows and something that the publisher can sell. Every new writer has to go through this process of being a nobody. And if you're lucky, you write a book that is thought of and successful and gets an audience, and then people like it and want to buy more by you. There's very little point in writing a one-off book and hoping to make a career off that these days. You've got to think long term. You've got to become an asset to the publisher. Books fade after a few years. People stop buying them and they want the next one. So it's quite an odd business compared with TV or film, which is a much more immediate audience. Millions of people watch a television show of an evening and then you move on to the next thing. With books, you have to sell them one at a time. So going up to conventions, which is great fun in the fantasy world, because all the people who go to the conventions are dressed as lizards and enthusiasts, and it's a very jolly atmosphere. My publisher actually had a romance imprint for a while. He's now moved on, he's sold that. He said the romance conventions were all people in suits in the corner earnestly doing business. It was all very serious, but the fantasy conventions are just great fun, full of open-minded, silly people, and the topics in the panels are very wide-ranging. A lot of very smart people turn up with these things, and people make their costumes if they feel like it. Anyway, so that's that particular world, but whatever you write, you've got to build yourself from nothing to make an audience, and it is a long-term project. For example, I always wanted to write books, but when I left Oxford University, I was lucky enough to get into television and get some script writing gigs, which paid well. Nobody's going to pay you to write a novel straight out of university. You've got to sit down and write the thing. It's got to be good enough to get published, and then it's got to sell. And that is a lot harder than writing scripts for a living. Also, if you're writing scripts, you're working with other people, like good directors, good actors, good producers, good editors, so you learn very fast.
Script writing, it isn't easy to get into, is it?
Not really. I don't think anything's easy to get into necessarily. I went to stay in Los Angeles before I was married, so this was 40 years ago, and I stayed with a friend of mine who was a young lawyer in the entertainment business. He said, I'm having lunch with some agents from CAA today. Why don't you come along? And I said, well, I've already got a very good agent at William Morris. I don't think that would be correct. He looked at me and he said, Richard, you don't realise they don't need you. And it took me a while to understand that is exactly it. They don't need you. Nobody needs you in that business. You've got to fight your way in and come up with something that they need. And then it's a question of there you are on the rails and you've got a career going. There is an old Hollywood joke, which is, do you know what the 5 stages of life in Hollywood are? This is mainly about actors, but it applies, I suppose. And the first is, who's Meryl Streep? The second thing is, get me Meryl Streep. The third one is, get me a Meryl Streep type. The fourth one is, get me a young Meryl Streep. And the fifth one is, who's Meryl Streep? So, it's a fairly brutal business, but the first thing is the same for all of us, writer, director, actor, whatever, is who are you? You're nobody. And you have to come up with something that people wish to buy and invest in.
Many writers get comfortable in one lane, but you consistently taken creative risk. What advice do you have for authors who feel hold and want to completely switch genres or mediums?
Well,
I know that's kind of a hard question.
It's a bit how long is a piece of string this colour. But the thing is, you've got to keep your eyes and ears open for other opportunities. I think if you're in the script writing, film, TV world, more things come across your peripheral vision than perhaps if you're in the novel writing world. An actor might say, I've got this idea, or I've bought a book, and can you help me? Do you want to write it with me? Or through my father-in-law, who was a music producer, I started working with Lee Holdridge, and we wrote several operas together, and then eventually I ended up writing one that was conducted by Placido Domingo, and that was a main stage opera piece that Lee did the music for. It was a success, a wonderful cast, and that was great. But these things come slightly out of left field. I never ever thought I'd write operas in my life. I don't come from a very sophisticated musical family. I don't think I saw my first opera until I was in my early 20s. A friend of mine was working as an assistant director at the Welsh National Opera, where I had my first job in television, a very low-level job, as they all are when you're starting out. We shared a flat together with 5 of us, 3 girls and 2 guys. And so we wouldn't all drive together. So I would get to his place of work and then drive home. So I got to see his rehearsals. I'd go stand backstage at the Welsh National Opera with 40 Welsh people on stage singing their heads off. And I was going, wow, this is amazing. I didn't know that opera was this electrifying. I thought it was for old fuddy-duddies. Then he put me in a couple of them. I had to actually carry an actual spear. It was really exciting. The tenor sang up my nose and he just had a lunch of garlic. It was quite hard not to flinch. I earned £10 for that performance. So yeah, but anyway, that's all I knew about opera really began in my early 20s. And then the chance to write them was great. I love writing songs. I've written songs for movies and comic songs for the stage. So I love versifying. And libretti is a step on from that. It's a combination of playwriting and lyric writing. And they've been a fantastic experience in my life. I'm really chuffed that I was able to do that. So for anyone else who's thinking about how do I do something that I'm not doing at the moment, generally just keep your eyes and ears open and talk to people. You can connect on the internet with all sorts of groups, reading groups, for example. People who are looking for new things. I say to young kids these days, look, you can make a film now for nothing with your iPhone. When I was your age, we had to get a 16mm camera and a crew.
Right, it's changed so much.
Yeah, go out and make a film. Go out and do anything. Just don't sit around waiting to get paid.
No, I agree with you. You have to be open to new experiences. You have to have that mindset. I'm a firm believer in things come to you when they're meant to come to you, whether that's people, opportunities, whatever.
Yeah,
that happens when it's ready.
I completely
But you have to be listening.
I completely agree. It's what Arthur Koestler wrote about in his book, The Roots of Coincidence. He said, coincidences happen all the time. We never notice them. We just notice the ones that we are interested in. So you see something and go, wow, that's an amazing coincidence. Actually, mathematically, it isn't. But you happen to notice it, so you think that's very significant. Things crop up when you need them because you're actually attuned to those things coming into your life. And then you seize the opportunity. When you get a great idea, you just have to sit down and write it. And the main thing to do is to realize that this is fun. Writing is fun. You've got to enjoy it. The fantasy books that I've written, of which the fourth one's been published this year, I remember during the third book there was a very complicated plotting that I had to do as the reader. Your job is to have an armchair ride, but my job was to work out the convolution. Every month I'd go outside and see the full moon and say, still haven't got the answer. What's going on? So you just keep working at it. You have to enjoy the struggle. You have to enjoy the fact that it's kicking your backside. You do learn this. I can tell you how you learn it. You learn it by realizing what you shouldn't write. I have one book, I think it's sitting in the cupboard behind me. It was like 285 pages long. I stopped halfway down to page 285. I think possibly even in the middle of a sentence. Because I just realised I wouldn't want to read this. Why would anyone else? And it was a sort of a drudge. I was getting through purely on willpower, forcing myself ahead. And then when I took that step back, I realised, I don't know what this book's about even. And it's boring. But that's a massively important learning point. Don't do this again. It blocks out a whole area of work you don't need to think about doing. Then you play to your strengths. One of my strengths is writing comedy, so that when I'm writing adventures, for example, funny things happen. They can't help it. It doesn't detract from the seriousness of the adventure, but it's an extra colour. Philip Pullman, who a writer I admire, he said, I don't know how to make you laugh, but I do know how to make you turn the page. And he's a good page turner. But I know how to make you laugh. That is an extra, if you've got an extra string to your bow kind of thing, you work on that and you throw out all the stuff you shouldn't be doing. Books you have to drop halfway down page 285 because they're rubbish.
The series I'm working on is also fantasy fiction.
Oh, great.
And one of my strengths is I have a very good sense of humor. So there's a lot of humor in it. And that's one thing I love about the fantasy genre is that doors are always open to add humor.
They do, because anything can happen. And it's extraordinary. I mean, look at a writer like Terry Pratchett, who's very different from me, but he's English. And there's fun. I mean, he's more tongue-in-cheek than I am, but he's great. I love his stuff. I look forward to reading it. When are these coming out?
I don't have an answer for you because I'm still writing.
Oh, yeah.
I want to have at least through like second edits and the first book completely ready before I start looking into publishing.
That's very wise. You only get one chance to make a first impression, so when you send it out, you want it to knock people over.
You need to give the best product that you can with the skills that you have.
Yeah,
even before you approach an editor, you don't want them to edit garbage or to turn you down.
That's lazy. That's asking them to do your job. You can sort that out. You can get it as good as you can. Then when you get your notes back from the editor, then you make it better, because that's what they're for. I read recently, nobody knows what the second best book ever written is, but we all know that the best book ever written is Pride and Prejudice, which is an absolutely perfect piece of plotting. It's extraordinarily good. When she wrote that, it was all in a Hampshire, well, not all, but quite a lot of Hampshire dialect, which doesn't really work for everyone else all over the English-speaking world, and not broken up into paragraphs. It was great long screeds of this, that, and the other. She simply didn't know how to lay it out. And her editor was a man in London, I forget his name, took her work, didn't do anything to it except put it in the right shape. And that's what an editor will do. Even if it's just something like that, you're working with somebody who wants to make your book as good as it can be. It's an absolute joy to work with a good editor. I've got a great one at the moment, and I'm very grateful.
I had an interview with Michael Totten. He's an editor, and he wrote the book Write, Edit, Publish, which is an excellent book on writing. I recommend it to anyone. But he said many of the same things that you did, that giving the editor your best product that you can with the skills you have is number one. And then also, too, he mentioned understanding the mechanics of writing. A lot of writers that I've seen that consider themselves writers still don't understand the mechanics of it. I see this in a writing group I belong to. They don't understand the mechanics of dialogue. They don't understand even the mechanics of plotting.
What do you mean by mechanics, Laura? Can you...
Like being able to plot properly. Being able to write dialogue properly. being able to
No,
do the things you need to learn as a writer to write well.
that's writing 101. I'm assuming for the purposes of this podcast that everyone knows how to write. We all know how to write. If you don't know how to write, well, yes, you should go away and learn, and then your passion will fulfill itself. But most of us, and we got a decent level of education, we can write. Learning the ins and outs of story structure, plot structure, I call it, I'll tell you why in a minute, is really hard. It's the difficult thing to learn. It's the most essential thing to learn. It's your job as the writer to do all that work, and it's not the audience's job to do that. It really annoys me when I'm reading something and I'm thinking, why are you leaving all this stuff for me to work out? Why didn't you tell me what's going on? One of the very first notes I got from my agent, who was my first agent here, Jill Foster, who was an agent to various Monty Python people and Douglas Adams of Hitchhiker and various other. I sent in a half-hour TV play, and she called me up and said, well, look, we need to talk about this. You sort of think everything you've written is really good when you were young. And I said, did you like it? And she said, well, in the end, yes, I can see that it's good, but I wouldn't have read it if it hadn't been by you. I said, what do you mean? She said, look, you're my client. My job is to read your stuff and support you and help you. But you have to let people know what's going on. And I said, well, look, as you saw, it unfolds and it reveals, and then there's this, and by the end. She said, I don't care about that. If you don't know what's going on in the first 6 pages, why the hell should I read it? Why should anyone watch it? You've got to tell people what's going on. Then you can surprise them. Then you can lead them down garden paths. That was the first major important note I got from an industry professional. You have to let people know what's going on. What is this book? And in journalistic terms, it's very simple. The old lesson was, tell people what you're going to write and then tell them what you've written. That's a reporting article. But yes, absolutely. Let people know what's going on, make it easy for them, and learn the intricacies of story structure. And that is hard. If you don't apply yourself to it, you're not going to learn how to write properly well-constructed stories. That's kind of nailing it down. Because great geniuses can come along and properly deconstruct something that is going to be brilliant. But there's still rules. And the rules are helpful. They're not things that tie you down in a straitjacket and say, you can't, this is restrictive. It's not. Story structure is nothing but liberating. And it's very important. It's taken me a lifetime to learn it. And it's the heart of the business, is structure.
I'm a fairly analytical person. It helps me as a writer, the journey of the story, like where I need to go, where all the pieces fit together. And when you're setting out a scene, knowing what those pieces are that you need to make a scene good, make it easier for me to fill that in with the writing and the story and keep that in the back of my mind as I'm writing the pages. I really like having that structure.
It's sorry, go on.
It's like having a plan, to have a plan.
What art? I mean, how can you... Not having a plan seems to me the height of foolishness. Here's how I worked it out, because when I started out, like as a child, a 6-year-old writing, you just sit down and write stuff, and then you realise you've written yourself into a corner or whatever. But you think at first, you just sit down and write, and it flows out of you, which of course it sometimes does. But if you look at it from the point of view of a detective novelist writer, in a whodunit, and he's got a list of suspects, well, I guarantee you a good detective writer knows who did it long before the audience does. He's got his guilty person, and he, or she, in the case of Agatha Christie, sets up the traps and the red herrings, and by the time it gets to the great reveal, you go, oh yes, of course, thank you, and now it makes sense, which is why we love mystery thrillers. But if that writer's doesn't know who did it until the very end, well, it's a hopeless idea. What I do is this: I love to write just to see where I'm going, but I've learned enough that you've got to pull focus and stand outside it and write your outline. So what I do in books, I have a file of 5 chapters and then the next file of 5 chapters. I've got a file of chapters 1 to 5 and I write those. At the same time, there's another file which has the list of all the chapters, and where each chapter is summed up in like 2, maybe 3 lines, where I'm going, how this plot thread works out. For example, something like where the characters meet again in the middle, what needs to be sorted out, and the ending. The first thing is to get your ending. I absolutely insist on this. the first thing when I came up with the New Rock, New Roll idea, which fell out of the sky and hit me on the head like a meteorite, I thought, how does this end? How does this turn out? And it was, again, the answer was absolutely pretty much instant. And I go, oh, yeah, that'll work. So then I had 400 or 500 pages, as in the end, by the time the book was finished, to get from the initial exciting idea to the point where it's explained. And the rest is plot. And plot structure is what's the cliche, the meat and potatoes of the job. If you're writing without getting your structure right, you're going to end up with something that's unstructured and it can be misshapen. So I would suggest always keeping a separate file with your summary, your synopsis, which grows and changes and morphs, but at least you've got something from the outside that you can go off to look at and say, right, this is where I'm going. Then you can fill in blanks from the synopsis. As you go forward, you discover things. People turn up, characters turn up who take over books. We all know this. And that's because nobody's written your book before, I hope. If you're copying someone else's book, that's not a good idea. But you don't know where you're going. Why should you? But if you find out, I'm going to end up there in the end, then you've got a destination and it's clear, so you know you're safe. And then you can go off and take all the risks and have all the fun and give your audience all the challenges and excitements and entertainment that you want to give them.
I keep a spreadsheet of each book. I keep a spreadsheet of the overall series so that I can make sure that I'm mapping things out properly and the story continues through the series.
Absolutely.
But I track things that, like, I even track within a book the scenes so that I can make sure when I look at it and lined up in a graph, I know this is it shows my analytical style.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. That's a good
arcs to the emotions up and down. And another thing I do is make sure that there's a notes section. So if I allude to something that may happen later, that I have that in there to make sure that I meet with it later.
Yeah,
it's
you've
very
got
complicated in one spreadsheet. It makes sense to me. But
no, it's very. But at the end, look, the end of the book, in book 3, New Rock, New Realm of the series, I give you the answer in chapter 9. There is a very simple, I think it's 16 lines of verse of 3 syllables each. It starts off with the words run and hide. It's as simple as that, 16 lines. And somebody, well, once this comes up, then the wise woman says to our hero, there's your answer. And he goes, what? I don't understand what any of it means. I can see what it says. And she says, well, you've been told. You've got to work it out now. So the next 30 chapters is getting through the process of discovering bit by bit and then going, oh, wait a minute, that was in the verse. That could possibly, but then I don't see how that. So it's just laid in. Right. And then it all, at the end, where they go, yeah, well, it's a risk, but I think that's your answer.
That's a great thing for the reader, though, is to have the clues there and then be in the same position as the character where you're trying to figure out how it all fits together. I love that.
That's exactly what I love when I'm reading a book. I don't know if you know the book Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, but that's great. You've got the rule of 3 puzzles that need to be solved, and then you get 3 riddles, and then you trust the writer's going to sort it out, and he does. And yeah, that for me is the great skill of adventure story writing. Can I ask you a question about your pentalogy? Tetralogy, pentalogy, that would be 5 books. Is it one story, a series, or a serial? Do the stories go on from one to the other?
Go on from one to the other.
So
but it's different. Okay, so you have the main character goes through all 5 of the books. Right,
same with mine. And
her story goes through all 5 of the books.
So then
each book individually is with an additional character comes into the story.
So basically, like mine, every book is a self-contained story, but then the story goes on in the next book for another self-contained story, and at the end it's all explained. What I found lovely about that process was that before you go to publishing, you can do it while you're doing your rewrites and your edits. You can set up things in book 1 or book 2 that pay off in book 2, 3 or 4. And some things that pay off in book 4 you don't even notice in book 1. Later it comes back and go, oh, is that what that? Yes, of course. Then says you can really lay your roots deep because all writing, all storytelling is set up and payoff. And if it's not set up properly, you can't pay it off. Look at the ending of the television series Game of Thrones. George Martin is a brilliant writer. I'm a big admirer of his, and I read all the books. But by the time they got to the end of the TV series, they were beyond what he'd written. So at the end, they suddenly threw away 11 years of work by having Daenerys, I think her name is, go mad for no reason. She's been the heroine you've been rooting for, and suddenly she goes mad and sets fire to a town. And it's just crap. Because the writers are not as good as George Martin. They hadn't set it up. If they want her to go mad, set it up in earlier episodes. Give us a hint. You can't just say, oh, well,
I absolutely agree.
Yes, her grandfather was mad, so she went mad. No, that's just very lazy. I hate it when a great work is spoiled by an inept adaptation.
Yes, me too. Oh, my goodness. That is so disappointing.
Yeah.
That really gets me. So let's talk about your books. So New Rock, New Realm, this is what I found is really interesting. I want to talk to you about is inspired by your love of online role-playing games.
Role-playing games, yeah, absolutely. The first book is called New Rock, New Roll, R-O-L-E, because a rock is a planet. In the very first chapter, the team of the three leading characters win the World Championship of Online Gaming, Sword and Sorcery, and the next thing they know, they're separate. He's standing alone on a field being chased by wolves with a crappy sword and shield, and what the hell is going on? So having been a champion in one life, he's suddenly a complete beginner and very vulnerable in a new world where he doesn't know what's going on and why he's there. And it just gets worse. He gets captured and hauled off in chains to be sold off into the army, which is where the training sequence happens, and he meets at least one of his old mates, and they begin to train and become skillful, which you need to do to survive in those sword and sorcery worlds. And the inspiration came from my playing online games with groups of people all over the world in my earphones, us all galloping off to get up to trouble. This is Elder Scrolls Online, I think, was the thing I was playing at the time, which is part of the Elder Scrolls franchise, Skyrim and other things. I suddenly thought, what would it be like to actually be this heroic young battle mage with a magic staff for real, in a world, not in a game. So it came out of gaming, and it's a fantasy set in a fantasy world that we can all relate to because it's the same as our world but different. And there is a form of writing now, I'm sure you're aware of it, called lit RPG or lit role-playing games. Yeah. It's not that. I suppose it's lit RPG adjacent, but those games are very much based on characters being in computer games or video games or something. Matt Dinnerman's written a successful series called Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is set in a game that's run by aliens from outer space. And he has to survive. Our hero has to survive with his cat, who's a good character.
And read that yet? Have you read it?
No, I've got it lined up on my audiobooks. My wife's read it, my daughter's read it. My daughter is the person I really listen to on these, and I'm just thrilled that she likes my books because she's not the sort of person who will blow smoke up your backside if she doesn't. She said, oh, there's so much going on in this book. It's taking me much longer to read than I thought. I think she's on book 3 at the moment. But that's just really nice when people that you respect are enjoying the work.
It is.
But anyway, she's done the Dinnerman series, as has, I think my wife's listened to a couple. But they're lined up on my playlist in my audiobooks.
I'm looking forward to reading it. It's on my list too as well.
Absolutely. There's nothing like a bit of fun. So I hope you enjoy mine. Have you read any of them?
I have not. You are also on my list. I wasn't aware of that, to be honest with you. I would have. It's definitely something I would be interested in. I'm an old World of Warcraft girl.
Yeah. Well,
I've been playing since the vanilla Warcraft back in the day.
Well, then you will recognize the world and the feel of the type of thing that's going on. But for real, it's not, as I say, I stress, it's not set in a game. It's just inspired by them. And the nice thing about writing fantasy is that things can happen in those worlds that just can't happen in real life if you're writing a realistic novel. So you've got a wider canvas in some ways, and you can let your imagination run riot, which it did. It was really a thrill to get the great burst of inspiration that those books took. And the third book, for example, my wife and daughter and I were planning a lifetime trip to the Antarctic, which was put off because of COVID. And when the time came, I just said to her, I can't go. I'm in the middle of this, I'm in this creative burst. And my wife's an artist, so she did understand. But now, because I finished the series, I'd go anywhere because the other things I'm writing are not demanding at the moment like that. But it was just, I had always wanted my entire life to be inspired, to be absolutely in the grip of the muse. And she's not gentle with you. She worried me around like a rag doll in the mouth of a pit bull. But there's nowhere else I'd rather be. And it was just great to have the privilege of writing these 4 books and come out the other end going, what the hell was that?
Mine series hit me like yours did. It was just like a strike of lightning, and here's this idea. And I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Isn't that great?
And
yeah.
It built up, and it really is a gift. That feels like a gift that was given to me. Like, here, this is for you. Thanks for playing.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a burden I'm laying on you, is to complete this idea. It's what we all want, is inspiration. Right. And this is interesting, something that I've talked about before. I always wanted to know as a kid, where did Shakespeare get his inspiration and things like that? Well, when you go to university, you can't ask questions like that because, well, the professors don't know, apart from anything else. But you're meant to talk about the work of art in terms of analysis of the human condition, which is fascinating. But I wanted to know how it started, as did my tutor at Oxford, a brilliant man. And the two of us used to actually just sit around and talk about writing instead of literature all the time. And I always wanted to know where inspiration came from. I discovered a few years ago the answer is that expiration, expire, spiro means to breathe in Latin, so expire, breathe out, means to die. Inspire, you'd think that means breathe in, take a deep breath. No, in Latin means 2 things. It means in or into. And inspiration is the muse breathing into your ear. It's the muse whispering her secrets. So this is the inspiration I'm giving you. So inspiration comes from outside, which is why you have to learn to keep your eyes open and be alert for it when it turns up and listen to it. And you always keep a notebook by the bed, because otherwise you have that idea in the middle of the night and you don't write it down and it's gone in the morning. You have to be receptive to the idea from outside. And when they come, oh my goodness, the excitement is just, it's just the best.
It is. You know that you've caught something special.
Yeah.
When you find it. It's such a good feeling. And that's what carries you through this entire brutal process of writing and even into publishing, is the joy you felt when you had that idea. Because if you didn't have that, it would definitely be
very important to keep very important to keep that joy, the fact that I really, all I've ever wanted to do is do this, even though I feel like crap today and this is horrible and it's gone wrong. But that's because it's a burden and it's a gift at the same time. And there is this idea, and it's up to you to damn well work it out. And to do that, you've got to put in the effort. But it's exciting and exhausting at the same time, and frustrating. But if you know how to write, which we all know how to write, if you know how to write and you know how to plot, you can get through it.
Right. Let me ask you a question. What does your day look like when you are in the middle of the creative work?
Well, I do as little as possible except write. I learned from a friend of mine who's a romantic novelist. She's been published for the last 30 years. And she told me that she wrote at night. I simply didn't understand that. I thought you wrote in the daytime and then you had the evenings off. It actually turns out that I write much better at night. I'm more relaxed at night. I get up late and go to bed late, and my wife gets up very early and goes to bed early. She's an artist as well, so she has her creative rhythm. I just make sure I get enough sleep, always have a notebook around me, and just switch the damn computer on. Just do it. You can, in fact, many times over the years you go through a stage of, oh God, I'll just write 1,500 words, and if they're no good, I'll throw them away tomorrow, which is okay, because you can do that. Because you might find in that 1,500 words you're going to write every day, you might find a little bit of something, or it might suddenly start working after a page, and you go, oh, we're onto something here. If you've always got at the edge of your brain that lodestar, the North Pole, the North Star saying, you are going to end up here. You don't know how you're going to get here, but as long as you know where you're going to end up, it's worth continuing. Which is why I said that you always get the ending first. Not just the specific plot ending, but where it lands, how the book lands.
Right.
And then you're okay.
Right.
You're tethered to the other end. You've got your beginning, you've got your end. You're on the rope bridge swinging over the chasm in the middle in the rain and the snow and the wind. And you're lost and cold and terrified. But unfortunately, that's going to happen.
It's true. It's true. And it's the journey.
Absolutely. You've got to enjoy it, the journey and the destination. I mean, you look at a great genius like Dickens. I don't know how he did it, but he would just write going forwards. He didn't have time to do outlines, I don't know. But he was doing episodic publishing every 2 months, was it, in the magazines? And he just...
I believe so.
He was a great master of plot writing, plot construction. Obviously, most of us aren't geniuses like him or Jane Austen. So help yourself out by figuring out your outline and giving yourself some structure to cling to. And away you go. Nobody's ever written it. The only person who's going to write it ever is going to be you.
It's funny because I constantly say that it's the same. Having an outline, a plot structure applies to your writing business. You have to have a plan in your writing business to make your writing business work. You have to have an idea of where you're going, how you're going to get through the publishing process, what your budget is, what your expectations are, all those things. It's really interesting that you carry that same type of mechanics into a writing business.
Yeah.
So I think thinking about it like that might make it a little easier for people who are good writers and understand plot structure into the mindset of being a marketing machine and a publishing machine.
I agree. It's something you learn as you go along. If you start where I did, which was loving writing as a child and just wanting to write, I always loved the composition classes and storytelling and wasn't necessarily any good at it, but there was, this is way better than mathematics. And then everything else you have to learn, all the rest of the stuff that's necessary to creating which is a craft. And some of it's not as intuitive as other bits. And it helps to know what the rules are, certainly of plot construction. And once you can do that, you can go off and break them joyfully.
You've been running your writing business for your whole career, haven't you?
Yeah.
Because so much of what you do work for other people, but you're set up as your own business.
Yeah, I've been a writer since I left university. It's all I've ever wanted to do. I've been lucky enough to do it. Some years, obviously, you earn nothing, and other years you get paid well, certainly in script writing. So I was able to buy my own house in London at the age of 28 through a couple of television series. I mean, I had to have a mortgage, obviously, and houses were a bit cheaper, well, quite a lot cheaper in those days, but it was a burden. But I suddenly had a roof over my head, and I just said, that's the problem of rent out of the way. And if nothing had changed in my life, I'd still be there with a roof over my head and trying to make it as a writer. I feel like I'm too lazy to do anything else. I don't have the time to go off to an office. I don't have the spare brain capacity to take on other people's problems. And I think the word for that is actually arrogance. I think you've got to have the confidence and say, I'm just not going to look at anything. I'm just not going to bother with anything else. This is it. I'm going to stick with it. And sometimes you muddle through and other times you're cruising.
Having built other businesses for other people and then also my own business and also being a writer, having that confidence and that I can figure this out. I know what I'm doing. If I don't know what I'm doing, I can learn to do what I need to do is a very important piece of your success. Obviously, you're very confident. I'm sure it was harder in the beginning, but confidence makes all the difference in how you build a business and how you approach people. It's just so important.
That's very interesting, Laura. I think I'd put it like this, is that when you get something done, If it's a show you put on with other people, or you get your first scripts that you write and the producer says good job and gives you another one to write, the feedback is validation, and you get the sense that this person thinks I can do it. This guy's head of a television station and he's giving me more work. I know I can do it, but suddenly once you get that feedback, it's I can do it now. It's a long time ago now, but it must have been absolutely so encouraging and crucial that you get that sense of, yes, they think I'm doing the right thing too. They don't think I'm wasting my time. And something happened the other day that was a disappointment on something that I've been working on for a bit, and you get a bit grumpy and you think, oh, bloody hell, really? Is that the answer? Because I know that the other guy's wrong about this thing. So you keep getting knocked back with stuff, however far along the line you are. The frustrations will keep happening, what I'm trying to say. I don't want anyone to think it's been by any means a cruise, that I've been super privileged and not had to deal with any adversity, because that would be misleading to my fellow writers listening to this, is that there will be adversity and there will be bumps along the road. Those are your best teachers. Failure is your best teacher.
Exactly. Yep. I've told my kids all the time they're growing up, and it's really cool to see them use this in their lives, is that no's and failures are not useless. They're a learning experience. But it's up to you to recognize that and to figure out what that lesson was and to carry it forward. So I absolutely agree with that. And some people get that earlier in life than others.
I think you would probably know deep down inside, if you're getting back knocked so much, you would say, actually, maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe I've been fooling myself. And you probably say, well, I think I knew all along I wasn't cut out to be a writer or cut out to be an actor or whatever it is. If you're lucky enough, that never happens. You never get that depth of, I was going to say despair, but that's wrong. I had one major project that was, I was just sitting in the bar. It was in America. It was a huge television thing that I had. That was my rocket ship to success. And it just didn't happen at the end. I mean, everything was done except the thing. And so you go away and you think, you just got to pick yourself up and move on. Last night, a friend came to dinner who's a television director, very well known, and he was talking about a TV series here. It's very successful. He was offered, and he had to turn it down because he was committed to another television series, which was the second series, and he really had enjoyed directing the first series, so he said he would do the second. And he never, ever before says yes to a second series because, first of all, you want many different things in your resume, and second of all, you want to spread yourself wide and meet new people and do new jobs. This was the one time he turned down a job. Turns out to be the big hit of the year. What can you do? These things will happen. They will happen to you.
Yep. Especially if you have a long and varied career. You will always have to face disappointments as well as successes.
Yeah.
Richard, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a really interesting conversation, and I'm definitely going to read your book. And I'm not just saying that; it's literally on my reading list.
Well, you can always get the audio books if you don't read, if you like to listen, which is what I do. And by the way, your listeners can always go to richardsparks.com and get a free chapter of each book. So that's 3 physical chapters to download, or a free audio chapter, one from each book. So start off with New Rock, New Roll, ROLE, so you can get it based on role-playing games, Planets of Rocks. New Rock, New Roll, what was the second one? New Rock, New Realm. The third one was New Rock, New Rules. That's the latest. And the fourth one comes out this year. So if anyone wants to check it out, get a free sample. And if you like it, please come on in and enjoy the adventures.
That's a great idea. I will definitely do that. So thank you very much. I'll share all your information, your socials, in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for coming on here. I appreciate it. Well, it's been a joy.
It's been fun, Laura. Thank you very much for having me.
Yep. To learn more about the podcast, visit thewritingbiz.com, sign up on the website to be the first to learn about new episodes when they release, and much more. And don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, take what you've learned and put it to work in your own writing biz.